Hello. Welcome back to the Foundations of American Democracy. I am Dr. Nicole Warmington Granston, and today we'll be discussing the American presidency. So, what we'll be doing today is explaining the constitutional foundations, powers, roles, and limitations of the American presidency. We'll examine debates over executive power, the many responsibilities presidents perform, and how the presidency has evolved into one of the most influential political offices in the world. With that, we can break down that into discussing the fact that we'll explain how the Constitution defines the presidency, examine presidential powers, explore the different roles presidents perform, discuss presidential popularity and leadership, and analyze the role of the president's team and executive branch. So let's look at defining the presidency. Now, at the Constitutional Convention, delegates faced three major questions about the presidency. Question one, should the U.S. have a president? Now, the framers decided the nation should have a single president, a natural-born citizen, at least 35 years old, and a resident of the United States for 14 years. Question two, how long should presidents serve? Presidents should serve 4-year terms. And the 22nd Amendment of the United States Constitution limits presidents to 2 terms. Question 3, how should presidents be chosen? The Constitution created the Electoral College system, where states receive electoral votes equal to their congressional representation, and citizens vote indirectly for president through electors. So from this, we see that the presidency was designed to balance democratic participation with limits on concentrated powers. So let's talk a little bit about the president's powers. Now, Article 2 of the Constitution defines presidential powers, right? Of course, some of it, because it's not as detailed as Article 1, you see that some points are relatively vague about the office. All the same, because the Constitution leaves room for interpretation, presidential power has expanded over time. Now, there's actually said to be 3 main types of presidential powers. There's express powers, powers specifically written in the Constitution, delegated powers, powers granted by Congress, and inherent powers, powers presidents claim are necessary to fulfill their responsibilities. With that, we know that presidential power often expands during national crises. So let's talk about some specific constitutional powers. There are veto powers, where the president can reject legislation passed by Congress. There is treaty-making power, where the president delegates treaties, or should I say negotiates treaties, but the Senate must approve treaties by 2/3 vote. There's the appointment power, where the president appoints ambassadors, federal officers, and the Supreme Court justices, and we know that most approvals require Senate approval. Then we have the executive privilege, where presidents may withhold information when necessary for national security and official executive responsibilities. There are also pardons and reprieves. The president may pardon individuals convicted of federal crimes. Then his power of commander-in-chief. Now, the president leads the Army, Navy, and state militias. However, Congress still controls declaring war, military funding, military regulations, just to name a few. So we see that the Constitution divides military power between Congress and the president to prevent an abuse of power. Now, there's 2 main questions out there about a president's power. The first is the president too powerful? Now, this introduces the idea of what we call the imperial presidency. Now, this concept suggests that presidential power has grown so large that it threatens Republican government. There's actually 2 competing concerns: that the country needs a strong leader, but we also state that too much presidential power threatens democracy and liberty. With that, we know that American politics constantly struggles to balance strong leadership with fear of concentrated power. The other question is the presidency actually weak? It has been argued that presidents can appear weak despite their enormous authority. Some of the obstacles that presidents face are Congress, courts, opposition parties, media criticisms, interest groups, and unexpected events. So we know that presidents often struggle most with domestic policy issues as a result. So with that, we know that the presidency may look powerful, but presidents face constant political resistance. Now, there seem to be two main views of presidential or executive power. We say that there's two theories of presidential leadership. You have the stewardship theory and you have the constructionist theory. Now, according to the stewardship theory, a steward president believes that the president should actively serve public interests and that action is allowed unless specifically prohibited. So an example of this would be expanding executive action during times of emergencies. Then we have the constructionist theory, where a constructionist president believes that presidential power must be clearly rooted in the constitutional or congressional authorization, and that presidents should avoid broad interpretations of executive power. So we said the main difference between the stewards and the constructionists are that stewards favor flexibility, while constructionists favor restraint. Now, what are said to be some of the main roles of a president? What do presidents do? Right? They actually perform many different roles simultaneously. The president is head of state, where he is the ceremonial national representative. He or she would be commander-in-chief, where he's the leader of the national defense and military operations. The president is crisis leader that responds during emergencies and national crises. The president is chief diplomat, negotiating with foreign governments. The president is chief negotiator, promoting laws and policy goals. The president is a chief executive, managing the executive branch and issues executive orders. The president is a moral leader, representing national values and ethical leadership. The president is also party leader, leads and organizes the political party. The president is manager of prosperity, responsible for economic stability and growth. So from this, we know that the modern president must simultaneously be a political leader, administrator, diplomat, military commander, and national symbol. So let's talk a little bit about presidential leadership and popularity. Now, presidents constantly try to shape public opinion and maintain popularity through media and polling. We've seen where great presidents or successful presidents have been able to redefine national identity, transform government, and change how Americans see themselves. However, it should be noted that presidential success depends partly on historical circumstances, not just individual talent. Let's talk a little bit about the president's team. The president's team is under what we call let's repeat that. The president actually leads the executive branch, which actually includes a massive administrative structure. First, we have the cabinet. The cabinet secretaries manage executive departments, though not all are close presidential advisors. Then we have the executive office of the president. This tends to be a network of agencies and offices that help to manage government operations and policy. And finally, we have the White House. The White House this includes the president's closest advisors, such as the chief of staff, speechwriters, legislative liaisons, and the office of the first lady. So we find that presidents heavily rely on advisors and bureaucratic support systems. Now, the central questions remain, or should I say the central question remains: is the presidency the most powerful office on earth? There is some debate, because we know that the presidency combines extraordinary visibility and authority, but there's also significant constitutional and political limitations. So with that, here are some core takeaways. One, the Constitution creates a flexible executive office. Second, presidential power has expanded over time, especially during crises. Third, presidents possess important military, diplomatic, and legislative powers. Fourth, The presidency balances strong leadership with constitutional limits. Fifth, presidents perform many political and symbolic roles simultaneously. And finally, executive leadership depends heavily on advisors and public support. So from that, we know that there is still this major debate on whether the modern presidency has become too powerful or remains constrained by democratic institutions. Thank you.